Hey, mamas, and welcome back to another episode of the Knitting Mamas podcast. I'm super excited today to bring you just knitting as a topic. And today we're going to discover how knitting can be your next favorite therapy for mental health. And I'm not saying that lightly. I do understand that there are, of course, moments when we need more help than just knitting, but I can definitely share with you today 5 ways how knitting can truly and probably surprisingly impact your mental health in a very good way. So let's dive into this episode. Hey there, mama. Welcome to the Knitting Mamas podcast. If you're a mom who's tired of feeling exhausted and longing for some well-deserved self-care and rest, you are in the right place. I know that finding time for yourself as a busy mom can feel like an impossible puzzle. But guess what? You don't have to compromise anymore. Hi, I'm your host, Nadine Medina, and just like you, I am a mom, wife, and also a happy knitter. Over my 15 years of motherhood, I have been on a journey to discover how to truly recharge without the guilt and the never-ending quest for perfection. The secret? It's all about progress, not perfection. By focusing on simple routines, natural wellness solutions, and the cozy art of knitting, I found the path to feeling whole and content. And on this podcast, I am sharing it all with you so you can do the same. Are you ready to find simple solutions to set yourself free from mom guilt, to take more time for yourself to truly rest, and to use your knitting skills for a mindful routine that creates space in your life so you can breathe easier? Let's take a deep breath, grab those knitting needles, and say goodbye to mom stress. Together, we'll create a supportive community that encourages you to prioritize self-care while juggling all your responsibilities. Sound good? Let's do this. So, welcome back. I hope you guys all had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. If you're in the United States, if you're elsewhere in the world, I hope you had a wonderful weekend. It may not have been a holiday weekend for you, but here we had a 3-day weekend, which was really nice. And for me, that meant that I actually got caught up on a few things, including knitting, because I did have a couple of projects, as you may have seen on my Instagram, that I had started recently. And 2 of them are a gift. So I needed to kind of, catch up a little bit and work on those, which was amazing. Also caught up on some reading when I noticed that the book that I'm currently reading actually was overdue at the library already. So, don't tell them. But I'm working on finishing that really soon. It's actually a really great book. I'm going to put it in the show notes so that you can see, and I'll link it up for you. So this episode is dedicated to talking about knitting as a therapeutic, way or tool to use in your life to impact your mental health and well-being in a really great way. For a lot of people who hear about knitting or look at projects that people are making, might just think of knitting as a hobby and some creative outlet and something that, actually creates something that you can either sell or gift or wear yourself. And it's fun and it's great. And I think that's such a wonderful thing about this craft, that it's, really producing something so unique for even wearing later on. So it's not just a piece of art that you put somewhere to look at, but you actually get to wear it. So I think, that's really fantastic. But a lot of people don't realize that knitting in itself can also be a therapeutic practice, and it can really, really help, have an impact on your mental well-being, which is kind of partially why I started this entire podcast, because that is what knitting has done for me, at least the second time around that I actually started knitting. So if you listen to the beginning episodes of this podcast, you may already know this. If not, I'm going to touch back on this story of mine really quickly, because it really is the reason why I started this and why I want to bring this whole, knitting for stress relief to all these other moms out there and all you guys, because it really has done that for me. So I first started learning to knit when I was in my teen years. I think I was about 14, maybe 15, maybe even younger, when my grandma back in Germany showed me how to knit very simple projects. As a matter of fact, no, it wasn't that simple. She had me even knit a sweater, which was so great. Like, I knitted this entire sweater in true, late 80s, early 90s style, red and black striped. Like, it was such a weird color combination. It may actually be in style again these days, thinking of it. But she also taught me how to crochet, which is something I do enjoy doing, but I, for some reason, prefer knitting overall. I think it has to do with the way it looks when it's done. But I do enjoy the calming stitches of crocheting as well. But she taught me how to do them both, because she would just sit on her couch, watch TV, or we would hang out together. And that was all she was doing. She was making so many awesome things, and she was so good at it. Like, I'm looking at projects that she made with, patterns on the front and the back that I haven't even tackled yet, even now. But she was making all of it. And honestly, it's funny, I never got to ask her who taught her or how she learned it. But I definitely enjoyed learning it from her back then. But then in my 20s, I kind of forgot about the fact that I know how to knit. So I got busy, and then I got married, and then I had kids, and I completely forgot that knitting was even something in my toolbox that I can use, that I can do for an outlet. I just didn't even think about it until the pandemic hit, and everybody kind of started to look for things that they can do in their home. And for me, I rediscovered knitting, and it was such a blessing because, of course, during the pandemic, we all had our share of mental, issues and anxiety and things that we didn't know, and like all these scary things happening in the world. And it was definitely something that brought me back to relaxing and calmed me down and just kind of focused me in on one thing only when I needed it the most. And because of that, I decided that number one, knitting is now going to be a part of my life forever and ever. Amen. But also, I decided to talk about this and, let people know that how amazing this effect has been on me. And it's not just because it's a creative craft and it's something that you can like show off and make gifts with and all these gorgeous, beautiful things. But there's so much more to it. And today I wanted to dedicate this episode to the 5 things that I think are the surprising benefits of knitting on your health, on your mental well-being. And just, I feel like if your mental well-being is impacted, then also your body will be impacted, and your entire surroundings, right? Your family, your kids, the way you go about life. And I think that's just fantastic. So let's dive into the 5 benefits that I have kind of figured out that, helped me. So number 1, it's a mindful practice. So I always compare knitting to meditation. I have seen people compare knitting to yoga, and I feel like those things go hand in hand anyway, because the whole point of yoga and meditating is to focus in on the present moment and to focus in on something that you're doing right now, right? So that really is the whole purpose of those mindful practices, for you to just forget about everything else for a couple of minutes or a half an hour or however long you're doing it for, and just be in the present and just do the one thing. And it can do such wonders for your clarity, for your focus, for your mental well-being, and just also for just your stress levels. And it just can calm you down. And I think if you are not maybe somebody who likes to meditate or do yoga, which I love both, but I also added knitting into that whole, trifecta of mindful practices. So just throw it in there and see what you think, because it can really have that effect. And a fun example for me personally is always when I'm feeling like when I do school with my kids here at home, I usually have my project nearby, but I also try to do other things, get to-dos done. Like we're just kind of like in and out, and I help them where I can. So I don't always get to knitting while I help them, but oftentimes I do. But I also notice that when we have a tough day or a stressful day, or somebody is, in a mood and I'm feeling it too, I immediately grab my knitting project and I'm like, okay, let me do this while I help them, because what it does, it puts me back into just this one thing. And I'm not trying to get something else done or trying to clean or, trying to make a phone call, things like that. I'm just like, nope, this is what I need to do right now. And I can listen to them and I can help them while I knit, and it's calmed me down every single time. So I think that's such a great, it just showcases how much that actually works, right? So the second thing that I find a huge benefit is gives you the sense of accomplishment. So when we accomplish something that we are proud of and that is amazing, like a knitted project, then of course our self-esteem gets boosted. And that is never a bad thing, right? So self-confidence and self-esteem boosts are amazing for our well-being, for our mental well-being. And, knitting and completing projects will do that for you. And this is why I always recommend starting with a quick project. Like when you're new to knitting, start with something either really small, like a tiny infinity scarf that loops around your neck, or a dishcloth or something along those lines that is easy to make. It's a square. You don't have to decrease. You don't have to increase, or you don't have to really sew up anything, put pieces together, things like that. But it gives you that super fast sense of accomplishment when you are just freshly learning the craft. And it does such wonders. It's so amazing. So this is definitely one of the reasons I want people to start knitting, because it's a quick learning curve and it has a quick sense of accomplishment for something completed that you made with your own hands. Just thinking about that, it just makes me so excited every single time. And then having people say, "Oh, you made that? Wow, that's amazing." I just love sharing that with people because it's one of my favorite things about it. Number 3, these are not in any order of, best to worst. Yeah, they're just in a random order that I put them. But the third thing is creative expression. And I think that is such a kind of an underrated contribution to our mental health, is when you can be creatively expressive, that it really helps you be more balanced in your life, right? And then for knitting, obviously, it's not just the process of actually creating, like making it. And you don't have to be a designer either to be creative when it comes to knitting. I definitely don't design anything myself, at least not yet. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to go there. But for now, I use other people's patterns and I knit my projects. But where you can completely be expressive and creative is color choices, right? Or different yarns that you're using. Just kind of play around with those things and see if you can personalize the project that you're working on just by doing those things, and just see how that helps you and what that does for you. I always see projects like out, usually it's on Instagram or on my website, on my favorite website, lionbrand.com, where I buy most of my yarn. And there's lots of other places I follow, a lot of designers, but you see a project and you're like, wow, I love that, but I would love that in this color, or maybe that would look great in, this other yarn that I have. And you kind of can become creative by just looking at your yarn stash and see, oh, what can I use for this? Maybe I have something here already that I don't have to buy. So all those things really help your brain also access maybe an area that you haven't accessed in a while because you're a busy mom. And, you may not be having a lot of chances to be creative, but it can really, really help get that side of your brain going again. And it's just such a beautiful thing. Okay, number 4, mental clarity and focus. So this ties back to the mindful practice, and there's another one that ties back to that, but it has another layer, right? It's not just, now we're mindful, but we also increase our focus and our mental clarity by practicing things such as knitting, that require us to truly hone in on it, like really focus on it. So if you're making a pattern that might be a little bit more complicated, or something that you haven't done in the past, maybe a new stitch, or something that you haven't done in a while. For me, that happens all the time where I'm like, yep, I've done this before, but I don't remember how to do it. So I have to look it up. I have to really focus on it, pay attention to how to do it. And then I have to mimic it, right? What I'm watching, and I have to do it myself and then see if it's coming together. And I just recently had this happen with 2 of my projects that I'm making. One is actually a crochet project. And trust me, it took me a couple of times to master the stitch that I had to do. It wasn't the stitch itself, but for crocheting, for me, it's always the edges on the left and on the right of the project that I have trouble with, because I can't quite find the right loop that I have to go into. And sometimes I just make them smaller, and they just kind of like, shrink as I go. And I had that happen, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? So I had to go back. I had to frog it again, go back to it, make sure that I actually read the instructions once again, and all those backs and forth. And sometimes, some people might say, oh, that's kind of annoying. To me, it actually really helps me. And because my mind is literally all over the place all day, every day, I'm like, no, I need to figure this out right now. And it really helps me get my brain where I need it in this moment and figure it out and do whatever I need to do to figure it out. And that, that focus really helps you in other areas of your life as well. And I was actually mentioning my other project, which same thing happened. That was actually a knitting project. It's a little scarf. It's so adorable. I will link them up below. But with that one, it's not even super hard, but I had to kind of like get into the groove of the pattern where you're like, oh, okay, so now I got this. Now I have, it's like every 8 rows, I have to increase here and I have to increase here. And then I have to count the rows and the stitches and whatever else. So like it just took me a second to get to the point where it became mindless, and where I can then say, oh, now I can do other things while I'm doing this, which is a fun place to be as well. But that focus of learning it and saying, you know what, I'm tuning everything else out for 10 minutes now so I can figure this out, I think has such great effects on everything else in your life that you do that also requires mental clarity and focus, because you are basically practicing how to be more focused. And I know that as moms that are busy with, outside school activities, if you're homeschooling like me, same thing. You're just literally pulled in all directions. Add in my puppy right now, which is a whole nother level of crazy that was just added to my life. There isn't a lot of practicing focus because you're just continuously getting pulled out of that focus, right? So taking the time to say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do for me right now can really center you and have that practice of focus for you that will benefit you in the long run. All right, moving on to number 5. This is the last benefit that I'm going to touch on today, and it is stress reduction. The whole reason why the Knitting Mamas podcast exists. Ease your stress through knitting, right? Knitting can reduce stress and anxiety. And of course, it ties back to how mindful this practice is, how you can increase your mental clarity and focus. And all those things together will lower your stress. I also recently read in a study that knitting can decrease your cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone that your body releases when it's under a lot of stress. And it's not a problem unless the cortisol is, continuously high, which happens often to us in these times where, jobs are stressful, family life is stressful, we're continuously going from one place to the next, to the next, to the next. And we're busy all the time. We don't eat healthy, and then we exercise and do maybe some crazy exercises that are also stressing our body out, which is something very interesting that I learned the hard way, that not every exercise is great for you in every moment. So it's a whole nother topic that we can talk about some other time, but all these things can raise your cortisol, and your cortisol continuously being high is very bad for your body, because it actually also helps shut down other systems of your body that are essential, right? But it does put your body into a fight or flight response, which is, we're going or we're running away. And it's not a good place to be in for a continued amount of time. So lowering your cortisol with whatever thing you can find, if it's a meditation or if it's a yoga class or just winding down, toning things down, is essential for us. It's a great, great thing. And knitting can actually do that. It can literally lower the cortisol hormone in your body, which is fantastic, and therefore reduce stress. So it's all proven that this is really working, and I think it's such an amazing thing. One more thing, little bonus tip here that I usually do with my knitting is I actually add essential oils to my knitting as well, which can increase and amplify all the things, maybe not the creative expression, but maybe they can. But all the things that I mentioned that go in with stress reduction, mental clarity, focus, mindful practice, essential oils can amplify all of those things. So while you're already knitting, might as well add an essential oil like lavender, stress away, frankincense, bergamot, orange, lemon, like all the happy oils in the good mood oils, add them to your knitting. Put one drop on your chest and inhale it, or put it on your wrists. And as you're moving your knitting needles or your crochet hook, you can get the aromatic benefits from that oil as well. I sometimes even drop it straight onto my yarn because as the yarn moves, it just basically diffuses around you. It's amazing. And speaking of diffuser, you can also just pop it into a diffuser close to you as you are settling into your knitting spot, wherever that might be. For me, it's usually on the couch. That's my favorite place to knit, or like I said, next to my kids at our school table as well. But those things are fantastic to put together and enhance your knitting session. And I just really hope that for this episode, you learned to kind of wrap your mind around the fact that you are doing such a fantastic and wonderful thing for yourself when you grab your knitting needles. It's not just this like, oh, I'm, being selfish here. I'm doing something I like and I feel kind of guilty about it. Flip that script around, because that's what we're all about here, right? We're not trying to do anything that makes us feel guilty, because mom guilt sucks and we don't need any of it. But flip the script if you're having trouble letting go of the mom guilt and just say, hey, this is for my health. This is for my mental well-being. This is truly supporting my body and my mind in all the right ways. And hopefully that mindset of doing something good for yourself truly helps you flip it around from, feeling guilty about doing something like this for yourself to actually feeling like you deserve it and you need to do it. So thank you guys so much for listening to just another episode of the Knitting Mamas podcast. And I hope to hear you guys back here next week. Hey mama, I hope you've soaked up some great ideas from today's episode. Remember, a happy mom makes for a happy fam. If today's chat hit home with you, it would mean the world if you could leave a 5-star written review on iTunes. Your review will help other moms discover our community and embrace guilt-free self-care. Also, if you're scrolling through Instagram, why not snap a screenshot of this episode for your stories? Don't forget to tag me at The Knitting Mamas so that I can shout you out on my page as well. Plus, that way we can stay connected and spread the self-care magic. Oh, and have you heard about our cozy Facebook community? It's a guilt-free zone where we share relaxing routines, essential oils, and knitting adventures, and so much more. Come join us today at bit.ly/knittingmamas and let's unwind together. Until we chat again, take care, mama. And remember, looking after yourself is not selfish. It's essential for that balanced life. Catch you soon right here on the Knitting Mamas podcast.